Good morning, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? Thumbs up, some sort of response to that. Great. All right. Well, thank you for your willingness last week to attempt the pre-recorded video. I know that the feedback I saw from that was it was preferable to nothing, but it was not as good as being in person, which I agree. It's not as much fun to record it without some sort of response from y'all. So I'm glad we are back together today and looking forward to this session very much. It looks like a lot of you last time resonated with some of those body types, which I am thrilled to hear if you have any more reflection on that. But today we're going to dive into pretty quickly one of my favorite things about the Enneagram, which is how it moves. And so we're going to start, as we often do, with a question for the Slido. So last time you were really stressed at work, how did you show up? And was it your best self? And you can answer that in however you feel. QR code's on the screen and the join code is down there. Don't forget, there's no space in that join code if that is how you're going to join. Irritated everyone, not my best self. Short-tempered, terse. Oh, terse is a great word. I love that word. Short and nitpicky, irritated, showed up stress, laugh out loud emotional. Okay. Uh, I am really, I think there's a really healthy way to lean into our emotions at work. Stressed is not typically that. I think I've mentioned it. My wife is a therapist, and often she deals with people who, in their corporate life, they don't feel like they can show their emotions. And when we repress those emotions, they often then show up when we don't want them to. So there's probably some work for all of us to do around that. Good, good. Yeah. See some more responses coming in. Quiet, so I wouldn't blow up. Oh, that's excellent. That's excellent. Um, yeah, there's going to be a question later on today about under stress, do you move inward or do you move outward? And in my spare time off work, I've been working on for a different project, some Enneagram tools. And one of the questions I'm looking at is, do people move in or out under stress? Yeah, inward. So a couple of inwards, a couple of outwards. Good, good. Thank y'all. One of the really cool things about the Enneagram, as we've said from the beginning, is that it is not a cage, right? It's not supposed to be something we are trapped in. Hopefully, if you've been with us throughout this time, you're starting to narrow in on maybe what your root number is. But the Enneagram is more than just a typology that tells us where the ground is that we move from or where we live. It is also something that when you see a typical Enneagram image, it has arrows on it. And we're going to use a couple of different ones today, but the Enneagram has lines of movement, and they are typically across the circle. 3, 6, and 9 form a triangle. And those arrows tell us where we move when we're under stress and where we move when we are healthy. And it's really, I think, has been for me one of the most helpful things about the Enneagram as a tool for self-awareness is knowing, being able to observe myself and see, am I acting under stress or am I acting into and towards my best self? So we're going to talk most of our time today about lines of movement. I think it's the more impactful part. As always, if you've got a question about anything that's said, throw it in the chat, speak out, however you feel comfortable responding. We're also going to spend a little bit of time just talking about the concept of wings. Whatever number you have decided you have a stronger affinity to one of the numbers on either side of you than the other. And that flavors, importantly, your core type. But again, I think that's maybe a little bit less helpful than the lines of movement, but it does help us get a more complete picture of who we are so we can be better teammates, better leaders, better partners, better friends, etc. So, with that said, let's move on to the lines. Remember, your type is not a box. Each type is connected by a line to two other types on this diagram. I'm going to show you in a minute. We call the move under stress disintegration. And I don't mean like some sort of sci-fi film or Thanos where you just get disintegrated at a snap. I mean, you are becoming less integrated as a whole human being. Under pressure, you are going to naturally take on the traits. You don't become that number, but you're going to take on the traits of a connected type. You're going to take on the worst of another number. When we are integrating, which takes work, integration takes zero work. It happens naturally. Integration, let me just make sure I said that right. Disintegration, moving under stress, takes no work. It's thoughtless. Growing and becoming healthy takes effort, takes self-awareness, takes conscious decision. But when we do that, we access the best parts of another type. And it is real-time intelligence. It tells us what's going on with me. And so as we explore, if you are aware, just a quick show of hands, or how many of you, after being through this or having come to this with some prior knowledge, are pretty comfortable with what your root number is in the Enneagram? Anita, yes. You think you're 9? Got it. Getting there. Ivanka, thank you. I'll just reiterate, it's okay if you don't know. Um, I think taking your time and feeling certain or just sitting with it is good. Danae, you're 6. Excellent. Claudia, good. Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Narrowed it down to 3 of them. That's good. That's good. It's a good start. Maybe today will help even a little bit move beyond that. When we are pretty certain and feel comfortable with our type, one of the things we can do is really start to explore that. There's a lot of resources about how to get really in touch with that. I'll be happy to put you in contact with those resources. But then also, when we kind of know where our home is, it becomes a real active sense of intelligence about when we're behaving in a different way, and how that works. So that said, let's look at it again. Under stress, we're going to be examining the worst of another type. So this is what happens under stress. It happens without awareness. It happens unconsciously. We borrow the low side behaviors of another number. It's involuntary. It's like breathing. It just is where we go under stress. It's not all bad because it helps us, when we know this, to recognize the pattern. Remember, there are no bad numbers. All the numbers have value and they add to the world. But sorry, I'm looking at the chat too. Yeah, even the test gave me 3. Yeah, we may come back to that next week a little bit about what we can do about that. Again, no bad numbers. Everyone has a gift. But under stress, we take on the woundedness of another number. We take on the the harder parts of another number. And so it's really about becoming self-aware. So when you typically see, if you look up the Enneagram, if you go to the Enneagram Institute, it's typically a black and white image that looks like this, except for the arrows are also in black and white and they only move one direction. I've created two separate charts here for us, but I'm going to just say this in case you are doing work outside of this. When you see a typical Enneagram chart, the historic one, Riso Hudson, Richard Rohr, any of those, here's how you know which way the lines are moving. Unlike so many things in life, if the line is pointing from your root number to another number, that's actually the stress line. That is the downstream, the easy. Just think about it like you float to that number without working on it or thinking about it. It's the upstream movement that is the movement of health. So we're going to go through all of these in a little bit, kind of quickly. But for example, I'm a 5. And so when I am under stress and unaware and subconsciously, unconsciously not doing any sort of self-care, self-awareness, etc., I move to the 7, the worst of the 7. Sevens can be the life of the party, but for me, when I move into that 7 space, it's escapism. I'm not trying to have fun. I'm trying to avoid whatever it is that I don't want to be dealing with. Interestingly, you see some of these movements are from numbers far away. As a 5, I move into another headspace in the 7. But when I am under health, I move towards the 8, and we'll come back to that in a minute. I'm going to go through all of the numbers so maybe you can identify with them after we talk about stress and health. Any questions right now about what we're talking about in terms of moving under stress? Okay. In health, we take from the best of another type. Uh, and so those lines are going to be a little different. And we'll talk about them now. Getting healthy takes awareness. I think about it a lot like going to the gym. Thinking about going to the gym, knowing that gyms exist, does not help. Um, it is only through active engagement that we can attain physical health, whether that's watching what we eat or moving more, etc. So it takes to grow and to integrate takes work. That's the reality. It's work that is, in my opinion, very much worth it. The gift of the number you move to is available. It's a resource in your life waiting to be accessed. And I think Rohr is right. One of the reasons movement works so well is that we talk about the Enneagram as I talk about it as like your number is the place where you stand, but you don't have to stay there. You'll always be that number at your core, it won't change. But it's the space from which you move. You don't have to be driven by the compulsions of your number, and you certainly don't have to be unaware of them. So I think it's good also in self-awareness to see where are you already moving towards health. I'll use myself as an example again. 5s typically are pretty withdrawn. We love information for the sake of information. We want to make sure we know enough. And we are often have analysis paralysis. But when I am healthy, I understand I can never know it all. And I understand that pursuit of knowledge is not just for my benefit or to feel superior or anything like that. It is to benefit the collective. And so I move from that 5 space to the best of an 8, which is I'm not afraid to take a stand. I'm not afraid to take what I know and put it into action. It's that move from the head to the body or the head to the gut that is a sign of health. Because when we look at the Enneagram, the goal is not to stay in one place. You're going to know your number, but it's to be free from our compulsions. to move and to grow and to be less compelled by what was subconsciously compelling us. So, in order to illustrate that, I want to just go through the types in the order that we went through them in the last three sessions and talk about where they move under stress and under health, just to give you a better idea of what we're talking about. So, our heart types. 2 is our helper. They want to be helpful. They have this drive to be needed, right? Under stress, they can really move into the negative part of an 8, which is to be controlling and demanding. And if you recognized yourself in some of the groups I've worked with in person lately, we've had some 2s in the room, and they would resonate with this, that they come from a place of wanting to be helpful, but when it's not reciprocated and they're under stress, that desire to be helpful turns into a real controlling, demanding kind of presence. When a 2 moves in health, they move into the 4 space where they become a little bit more individualistic, which is a healthy move for the 2 because the 2 then is finding their own inner life. Now they're still helpers, but they're not helping because they need anything in return. They're helping because that's who they are as a person. 3s under stress, kind of in this core triangle, we'll see the 3s, 9s, and 6s interacting. 3s under stress who are performers, they are the achievers, they shut down. They just go through the motions. There's nothing behind it. They move into the worst peacemaking parts of the 9 and lose their drive. But when they are healthy, they move into that 6 space where it suddenly is not about their achievements. It's about loyalty to a team, and it's about the achievement of the group as a whole. 4s are our theater kids. They're individualists, the maudlin ones. And when they are under stress, they move into that 2 space. They get over-attached. These people who are all about being iconoclasts become really needy. They need that love, that support, that feedback, and it's not a healthy space for them. But when they grow, they become really disciplined. In that 1 space of striving, not the negative 1 space of like criticism and perfectionism, but of like principles and discipline that sometimes our more artistic people, I'll talk about wings in a little bit, can lack. Any questions about where the heart space moves in stress and in growth? Okay. Now we will go to the head cases, head types. I say that as one of them. I've already talked about where I go as a 5, where 5s go. We are investigators. We get scattered under stress and we get decisive under growth. So I feel like I've already talked about that a little bit. Don't want to overemphasize my own type here. 6s are loyalists. At their worst, 6s are paranoid sometimes. And whoever said they were a 6 earlier, I'm not necessarily talking about you. I'm just saying they are always looking at the worst case scenario. Under stress, that gets really performative and competitive. Thanks, Danae. I appreciate the thumbs up. I think about loyalists who are security focused can become really performative in 3s. I don't want to make it not political at all, but the whole don't tread on me kind of movement, this rugged individualism, this posturing as being super tough, is often a 6 moving into this competitive 3 space. Danae, I'm not saying you own that shirt or that flag. Maybe you do. It's a cool flag. It's got a snake. And then 6s in growth really move more from that security place to this place of peace and where they start to trust themselves and others more than is their default. 7s are enthusiasts, are dolphins, are party animals. When they are stressed, they move to that 1 space and If joy is kind of their defining characteristic in their home base, they become joyless. Nothing is ever good enough. It's not the healthy parts of a one, it's the hypercriticism. But when they're healthy, they move to the five space where they take what is often a variety of interests and they move to a space of really going deep on a few of those. And they do it with a deep joy that's effervescent, that's shared with the world. Any questions about our head space, head types? Okay, body types. Eights are our challengers. They're kind of the emotional bull in a china closet, often hard to handle in meetings. And yet, when they're under stress, they get really withdrawn. Um, an eight can be kind of like I said, they can be kind of hard to deal with sometimes. But uh, I may feel that way because I'm a five, and so when an eight's under stress, they're heading into my territory. They get really secretive. They get withdrawn. They start to plot and plan, and they don't live into their gift of being a voice that often speaks up in the room. But when they grow, the eights move into this helper space. And so they're moving from that body space into that heart space. And they really see that they soften, really, is how it often looks from the outside. Um, they open their heart and they use that power for others. I know a pastor, she is a hard eight, and will tell you that she knows that about herself. She's very self-aware. She has really been through the ringer, through emotional things. Her husband died. Her mom died, all within a year of one another. There'd be a real temptation for her to move into that withdrawn, secretive space, but instead, as her pastor, not only in her role but in her personality, she has taken that impulse to be a challenger and made sure that what power she has, she's using for others, with a real softness and sensitivity to those who are often left out. It's a really beautiful space for the eights. They are such big-hearted people when they get in touch with it. All right, Anita, let's talk about you for a second. Our peacemakers under stress become very anxious, paranoid, worried. They are dealing with all the worst parts of the six. But when they're healthy, they move into this drive. And so this one who's been this peacemaker, making sure that everybody gets along, now is becoming more willing to put themselves out there, to step forward, to perform a little bit more, not in that negative performative space, but in the space of, I have something good to give to the world and I'm going to step out and show it to the world. And then finally, our ones, which I know a lot of ones that I love, under stress, that self criticism, which is always striving for perfection and looking at the base of the one, that anxiety, just, my wife is a one, and it's like, we were talking about something the other day, and she was like, I was going to do it this way, and it's not a smart way to do it, but I was going to do it this way because I felt like it was the right way to do it. And so she was able to examine that and step out. But when they're under stress, they can get really moody. They can feel like the world is out to get them, that self-pitying kind of martyr space. Ones become a lot of fun when they can let go of a little of that perfectionism and move into the growth that really joy and spontaneity. I can tell you, it can be really hard for ones, some of the ones I know, to move into that and to relax. But when they do, man, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. The reason we go through all these is that we want to be people who can name the pattern in our own life as it's happening. Uh, I've got folders full of unfinished projects, that are, kind of mental creative projects. I've got house projects that I've started and not finished. And I can look at those, and particularly with the folders full, because there's like documentation and nobody telling me, hey, you need to finish doing this thing. I can look at those and see the date of when those were created, and I can go back and say, man, I was not healthy then. I wasn't even trying for health. I was really scattered. And instead of having the wherewithal to finish something to put out into the world to benefit the community, I was just turning inward and escaping the difficulty of finishing things, the difficulty of dealing with the real things that needed to be dealt with. And so I started a bunch of projects. Um, Now, the older I get, hopefully the wiser I get, I don't have those folders as frequently anymore because I catch the pattern earlier. And I reflect, I do the internal work to be able to say, well, let's finish it. It's good when we can catch that pattern at the beginning, that awareness before we move into that automatic space. For me, this is true. I think it's pretty true for a lot of people, no matter which center we move out of, being really attentive to our bodies. I am increasingly convinced, whether you're a heart center, a head center, or a body center, that our bodies often are telling us things that we cannot even begin to process through other ways. My son has taught me a lot about this. He's 16, and when he was younger, when he was nervous, he got sick to his stomach, like literally sick to his stomach. Um, I probably don't need to describe that anymore, but I had never really been around someone who had that physical bodily manifestation of existential dread or some sort of crisis or anxiety. But he's not alone. Some of us may not get sick, but we start to notice a crick in our neck or our shoulders are tight. Sometimes it's even like when we're sleeping, like that we slept in a weird space because our body was contracting. It's good to pay attention to what our bodies are trying to tell us about how we are feeling, maybe even more than our minds can recognize. The type question that we talked about in sessions 2, 3, and 4 is really helpful. What am I afraid of right now? Am I afraid of not being loved? Am I afraid of not knowing enough? Whatever that question is, can really help us understand the movement we are experiencing. Now, it's not a fake it till you make it. Self monitoring with so much of the Enneagram, we don't set in judgment of it, we set in recognition. When we recognize something, that's the first step to change. Not saying, oh, I hate this about myself. It's just going, oh, this is what's happening. And now that I recognize what's happening, I have a choice about what to do with it. Hating parts of ourself rarely leads to any sort of substantive change. Our egos are doing different things in these 3 levels. When we're average, let's start with that in the middle. Our patterns are running automatically. I'm acting like a 5. It's where most of us are most of the time in our root number. Unhealthy, when I am defensive, it is a real key to me. Before I even say something defensive, if I feel that defensive guarded space, I know that maybe I'm moving into an unhealthy space. Maybe I'm trying to guard my ego, and that's the first step towards acting like a 7. When I'm healthy, my ego's there, but it's not compulsive. I'm able to give more freely of myself. It takes practice to recognize. Some of you may be better at it than I was. It takes practice to recognize those patterns. But let's start with just a reflection in the Zoom chat. What is one pattern that you noticed in yourself this week, and just take back to the last 7 days, that might have been your type's stress response now that we've gone through them? Yeah, some of you, Claudia, you're so good at the emoji usage. Like I'm not that good at it. Thinking no one cares about something as much as I do. Yeah, yeah. When that happens, do you feel kind of sorry for yourself? You feel like you're out on an island? Finding excuses, not owning behavior, not asking for help. Procrastination because I feel anxious. Shannon, what can you share? Are you comfortable sharing what your number is? Okay, a nine. I'll tell you, it's also a pattern I notice as a five that procrastination looks like avoidance for me, but as a nine, sure, moving into procrastination, moving into that headspace of the six. Claudia, that's great. Try to notice it before I spiral. You're a six. You're in the head. Spiraling comes easy. That's good. That's good. I think it's important that we learn to see these patterns. Um, and the more we can see these patterns, the more we can step in before we spiral or before um, we've procrastinated our day away, sort of thing. The weight of responsibility actually feels crushing. Thanks, Joseph. I appreciate that. Yeah, yeah. You feel it in your body, like it feels heavy, like walking in molasses. Okay, well, let's try to look at the positive for just a second then. For some of us, the pattern in the negative is so much easier to notice. I know for me it is. But I would ask the same question in the Zoom. This doesn't have to be in the last week, but when you know you are living from your best self, I want to hear how does it feel? How does it feel to you when you know you're living in your best self? Content. Good. It's a very good nine answer. Accepted. Oh, yeah. Fulfilling. Yeah. Decisive and focused. I know you're still working on your number, Ivanka, but I resonate with that as a five. I moved from thinking about many things to being able to have a lot of clarity about one thing. Um, that's great. Funny, free, excellent. Yeah, yeah. I think the, the goal there is that we learn to feel that. Because if we can recognize the negative feeling and we can recognize the positive feeling, um, I think we're going a long way towards being so self-aware that we're really living in health more and more often. Energized. Yeah. I I feel at home in myself. I feel like it's hard to describe even, but like I'm really living into who I am meant to be. Um, it is very fulfilling. It's very energizing. The more we can recognize that negative pattern flowing between a nine and a five and some seven behaviors, but not fun. Eliminated that one. Yeah, that may be a five energy acting under stress. That could warrant some exploration for sure, Ivanka. The more we can recognize that negative pattern and the positive pattern, the more we're able to say, "Hey, I'm doing really well today," or "Hey, maybe I need to give myself a timeout." which I've often found more effective than giving children timeouts, um, just to reset and be intentional about what I'm doing. That's great. I hope that you find the movement of the Enneagram as helpful as it's been to me. I think as a leader, as a team member, as a person in the world, it has been one of the biggest gifts the Enneagram has given me as a tool just to be self-aware of some things that are often happening unconsciously. Uh, I do want to spend just a few minutes talking about wings, and particularly for those of you who are having maybe a hard time identifying your number. The wing may be a helpful concept. Every number in the Enneagram has wings. It's like a bird, it has two. So if you are a 6, a 9, or a 3, you are in the center of that type, right? You're in the center of the heart, 3 in the heart, 6 in the head, and 9 in the body. That means both your wings are still within that center. So that looks a certain way. Um, if you are any other number besides 3, 6, and 9, it means one of your wings is going to be in a different center. And so that can be clarifying. So for me, I'm a 5 with a 4 wing. I live in my head most of the time, but I was a theater kid. I don't mind a little drama here and there. I can also lean into that real depressive side of the 4. Uh, it has helped me understand my particular flavor of fiveness. I'm definitely a 5. I'm not a 4, but I'm influenced by that. When we start to expand our understanding of the Enneagram, and again, you can identify parts of your life with all the numbers, but there's a place you really live most of the time. We start to understand those wings. It helps make it more personal. That's what it's done for me. And so I want to give a few examples, and if you have questions, we can talk about it later about how it might look, but just a few examples of what it might look like with these wings. So if you are a 3, you're an achiever. A 3 who has a 2 wing is going to be charming. They're going to be really focused on people coming out of that helper space. They're really warm. The 4 wing in an achiever is really that introspective, they're image focused, authenticity driven. It's more of the drama and the artistry of the 4, but in someone who is trying to achieve. In 6s, the loyalist, the 5 wing, and again, these centers are sometimes the hardest ones to identify because they're in that same space, but a 5 wing, they're going to be really cautious, data driven, analytical. With a 7 wing, they're going to be more sociable, optimistic. A 6-5 wing typically is the more negative expression. It comes more easily of the 6, whereas the 7 really has more of a little bubble to it, though they still have they're great at worst case scenario. Our 1s, our reformers with a 9 wing, they're really gentle, they're patient. With a 2 wing, we often find 1s in like who are real helpers. They're in helping professions. They're around other people a lot. A 1 with a 2 wing is if you think about a 1 who would also be like a teacher, that's a 1 who is like really giving into other people, driven by perfectionism, but they want to be helpful. A 9, and let me just go back to the 1 for a second. Here's the difference. The 1 with the 9 wing is staying in the gut, right? They're in that space of everything is happening in the gut. They're idealistic and they're gentle. The 1 with the 2 wing now has their center in the gut or the body, but they are also have a deep connection to the heart. Our 9s are peacemakers with an 8 wing. They tend to be stronger voiced, even as peacemakers. And with a 1 wing, I'm not going to lie, I think 9s are pretty hard to get narrowed down a lot because they're such peacemakers. They could be so non-confrontational. They're more confrontational with an 8 than with a 1. But there's an assertiveness to that is different than someone coming out of the 8 energy. As we have learned about all of these numbers and you narrow in on where you think you might be, I think it's helpful to know the numbers around you to really feel what uh, your particular flavor of the Enneagram of your type might be. Okay, any questions about wings that you want to explore before we kind of close today? As always, you can email me, call me. I'd be happy to talk about what that might look like in your life. So we learn all of these types and we learn where we're rooted, where we start from in the Enneagram to know our home base. And we learn about movement because we want to be able to recognize our patterns. The Enneagram shows us our patterns that are often we're blind to, so we can be more aware and more than trapped by our number. So the question is, after we understand movement, what I want to know from you in the Slido is what would it look like for your team, to those outside of your own head, for you to be at your healthiest as either a leader or a team member right now? How would you look to them? What would be the expression of that? More inclusive. Okay. Organizing fun events with new people. Yeah. There's a lot in that. Organizing fun events for us. So not just for yourself, but for others with new people. That's real inclusive in that, real expansive, interactive. It's interesting so far. All of these are really about how you are being perceived by other people. I mean, I know the question's about how are you perceived by other people, but it's also about that you begin to expand beyond yourself to bring others into your orbit or to join the orbit of others. Yeah, making time for people or members. Yeah, that's great. That's kind of the backside of the assignment. And for the kind of homework before we wrap it all up next week, which is I want you, the question is catch yourself moving into your stress pattern once and name it. And I think that's true. I think stress patterns are often easier to identify. And so if you can name that stress pattern and identify it, you've done your homework. If, on the other hand, you can't name it, or you're not having a real stressful week, then name that healthy pattern. Again, we just want to become people who are capable of observing our own lives to become self-aware. Again, I hope this has been helpful to you. I think movement is one of the key tools within the Enneagram. We will wrap it all up next week with how we use this in our day-to-day lives, what it might look like in our teams. As always, there's a survey you can fill out with that QR code. I will send out follow-up materials, a link to the recorded video, the slides, and a handout later this afternoon or tomorrow. And thank you for joining. Thanks for being a part of this. It is a real privilege to get to do this with you and explore how we might all grow as people. So thank you all.